Hey, welcome back. I'm Professor Mark Leone with NKU's Drawing Database. Today we're going to talk about and look at drawing papers to get you started. We're going to look at the newsprint, what that's good for in different sizes, and we're going to look at drawing paper, white sketch paper in different sizes and what that's good for. And we'll look at a few sketchbook papers, and that should be able to get you started. Now, there's specialty papers out there. Don't worry about that right now. You may know some of those things on your own, and that's fine. For those of you that are beginners, don't worry about that. We'll get to those types of specialty papers later on because there's all kinds of types and sizes, different paper weights. We'll get to that stuff later on. Also today we're going to I'm going to demo and look at sharpening your pencils, different ways to do that and why that's important, from a very fat, broad side area to a very tight tip. You want something that can get all of those ranges. Okay, so today's about papers and about sharpening pencils and sharpening utensils to make those, sharpening and sanding your pencil down. Okay, so stay tuned. I'll be right back and we'll get started. See ya. Okay, let's get started. So looking at sharpening pencils, charcoal pencils, graphite pencils, the works, mechanical pencils. I've got a lot of materials in front of me. So it might seem a little strange, a little funny that you would think, what's the big deal about sharpening pencils if you're a beginner? Well, there's quite a bit. There's a big difference between working with this kind of tip and working with this kind of tip. They both might be fine, but you might need a better tip for different kinds of drawing practices. Something broader and wider for big, long swath, or something more blunt for different exercises. And sometimes I don't even sharpen materials, like something blunt, like a big Conte. I might sharpen a little bit, but coarse compressed charcoal, I might not sharpen at all if I have to draw on a large scale, but they still could be sharpened if you want. So first thing I'll talk about is, we'll start with charcoal. And so I've got a utility knife, which I recommend for everybody. So this is a big deal, and again, it comes with blades if you saw the other video. So I'm going to show you how to change blades. So you retract the blade, and this is a Phillips or regular screwdriver head, and that comes out. Let's take it out a little bit further here. There we go. And so you take that out and save that screw, and then the blade is inside. Now both these blades are pretty old. They're pretty dull. So I'm going to set that to the side, and I've got a brand new blade I'll put in here. So I'll put my cartridge back in, and then I'll put the blade in here. You can kind of see where these grooves are in through here. That's where I'll put the blade, right in through there. And then I'll close it up by putting the top part of it back. Like so. Slips in there. There we go. Then I'll put the top part back in. Everyone's just a little bit different. And I'll put the screw back in. Some are easily retractable, rechargeable. Those are nice. The Cobalts are really nice. It starts with a K. This is a Stanley. I've got several different types. Anyway, it's just a knife. So now here we're good to go. So it retracts, it opens up, closes in, so we're good to go. All right, so let's take some charcoal pencils here. I'm going to break and make that, render that pretty useless in terms of sharpening. Now this point comes right out of the pack here. There we go. Let's get you zoomed in a little bit. And so this one comes right out of the pack. You can kind of tell that it's fairly machined looking, and so it's an okay tip. I don't recommend using that much. And this one looks like you're drawing with your knuckle. This one's pretty beat up, right? There's not a whole lot left to that. So let me widen out just a little bit so we can look at some sharpening. Here we go. And so the first thing I do when I sharpen is, number one, I make sure I've got a nice blade, and new blade, and I want to keep it really horizontal to the shaft. I want to come at it at a 90-degree angle, that's just going to chop it off and then you're going to hurt yourself. So always use a very sharp blade. Buy a whole pack of blades like this. I think I've shown you that before. That's really important. They come with a ton of blades and I'll let my students use it. So those are good to have. So keep the sharpener horizontal and then just start to shave off and turn as you sharpen. Shave and turn. Shave and turn. Okay? And don't worry if you break the lead. Sometimes that happens. That's just part of learning. So I keep a very light touch when I hold the blade. I start to scrape away and I'm turning as I scrape away, keeping a very light touch. So that's a pretty nice exposed lead that we have. That's pretty nice. So let me get these shavings out of the way a little bit so we can see a little bit better. I'll take my trusty brush. Get that out of the way. Okay, so that's pretty nice right in through there. You can see that. So let me get in a little further. So that's nice and taken in. Here we go. Remote control doesn't want to work as well as I want. All right, so that's pretty nice. But what about that fine tip point? How do we get that? Well, couple of means. What I would do now is take my tongue depressor sharpener, like we've got here, and open it up to a clean pad, or if you're, if it's still got if you're using charcoal, keep it with charcoal. If you're using graphite, keep one with graphite. So I find a new one here, and then I start to lightly scrape across the edge of the sharpener. It's like I'm chiseling this pencil, I'm sculpting its end. And so I keep working it, and I'm also twirling around as I'm doing it ever so slightly. And I'm not scraping on the wood part, just the exposed charcoal bit. And what you want over time is to get a pretty fine point. Blow that off. Take a look at that. That's a pretty nice tip. So look how sharp it is, like a dart. I tell my students, if they get mad at me, they can start to throw this pencil at me and it would stick in me. It would sit it's so sharp. So look at the difference between the manufactured point and then the one that we've manipulated ourselves. And the reason why is, let me bring a scratch piece of paper over, is that now take a look, I can lay this pencil out and look how broad I can make a stroke, a mark, and then I can turn it up on its tip, hold it more like a writing pencil, and look how finite I can make line. From hatching, cross hatching. So you get both, and then if you're very facile and very fluid with the pencil, you can, this is the reason why to hold it in a more like a palm way, is you can make a stroke and then come up and make a tip all in one movement like that. So that's very important. So what I did again was, we had a sharp blade, sandpaper pad, depressor, tongue depressor, sandpaper pad, and again sharpen that charcoal tip with the blade. See how I can touch it, but I'm not taking anything off? It's resting right on top. And that's what you want. You don't want to cut in like that. And if you do that down here, you're going to break. You're going to break it pretty well. And you can shave these little bits off to expose as much as you can, and shave more charcoal off that way. Okay? So that's how I work the charcoal pencil. Now you can see it started to get a little blunt already there, and then you can come back and just sharpen up that tip depending upon that. Now the harder charcoal pencils obviously will stay sharper longer, and The softer charcoal pencils will not. They will need more sharpening. But that's a very strong standard draftsman or draftswoman way of holding a pencil. And again, the difference between the two are pretty palpable. Okay. Now, having said that, I will go back on my own rule. And sometimes, you know, I don't necessarily like the longest one. I've seen artists, I've had students that like to sharpen them way out here. Michael Bell, I'm thinking about you, right? Way, way down, even like 1.5 inches. But for me, I have a little bit more forceful touch, and I break these more often. And if you break them like that, that's okay. You know why? Because you just come back and you resharpen again, right? No big deal, and you keep on going. But it's important to have a sharp blade. You don't need to take off too much at a time. I think students try to do that, they get in a rush, in a hurry. And yeah, it's gonna be messy, don't worry about it. Don't wear fancy clothes. Okay. And then if you have a sandpaper pad like I do, you can use that. This is a little bit coarser grain, so it won't necessarily get a fine tip, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so that's the charcoal pencil. Now, if I'm working in, let's say, compressed charcoal stick, so let me break this out. Here we go. So I'll break one out here, and they come manufactured into this square tip. You can see that, basically a rectangular cube, right? And that's not a very responsive drawing point at all. I wouldn't like that. So if it's soft enough, you can kind of scratch it on a piece of paper like I'm doing, and that kind of gets it rounder. Or you can take your big sandpaper pad that's a little bit coarser grain and start to knock off that harder edge, okay, like so. And you can see where it's a little bit more of a rounded edge. Now, you could continue on and make that into a point, which I've done sometimes. Sometimes this is enough of a point if, you know, I'm drawing large or having my students draw large. That might be actually a decent fine point for something that's pretty large. But that's pretty workable now for a large piece of compressed charcoal. So, you know, just turning the charcoal to the side, a little bit to the side, and kind of just chisel that point as much as you go. Basically, just scrape it off like grating cheese. Nothing too hardcore or too hardcore or too difficult, I think there. All right, so that's compressed charcoal. So for graphite pencils, I might do something a little different. And you can do the shaved method with the utility knife. I think that is a superior method almost all the time. And with graphite pencils, what that would look like is something like that. But I don't always necessarily need that with graphite if I'm not using the blunt side too often. And so I will shave the graphite pencil in the same way. I'll shave it down like so. Graphite can be a little stronger in terms of when you're shaving off, you know, some of this material. It doesn't quite break, but you still have to be careful. So I'm just gingerly, basically holding it on the surface and just whittling away like Grandpa might have done years and years ago, right? So whittling that right away down to a point like that, and then of course you find your tongue depressor pad if you want, or fine sandpaper, 220, 120 grit, and just come on over and sand down that tip. But remember, I'm not sanding down the wood. I'm just sanding down the tip of the exposed material, in this case graphite. So that's a pretty nice fine point like that. Now, I teach my students too. I like the handheld sharpeners until they get pretty dull. So I'll break this one down. Actually, I'll break this one. No, we'll leave it. And I'll come back and just use the handheld sharpener, and that just shaves it off. It's one little small blade, and I think this is self-explanatory. And you just twist it and turn it, and that gets you an exposed part. Sometimes it gets uneven, and so that can be a little bit of a drag. And if it does that, that means probably your knife is a little bit dull. But that will work. That will give you a tip. But I think, again, for better draftsmanship, you're probably going to want to use the knife method and the sandpaper pad method. I think that's going to be, for the most of you, the best. Okay, so that's graphite and that is charcoal. Now, moving on to color pencil, kind of the same approach, although remember the Progresso pencils are housed in an acrylic resin on the outside of it. So let's pull in a little bit and see, you can see that a little further. They have a little bit of sheen to them. See the light hit that a little bit. There you go. You can kind of see the sheen that hits that, and so it's got an acrylic resin. So that means that all of this is an exposed lead, just like a Conte crayon, right? Or just like a piece of compressed charcoal, which is pretty nice in colored pencil. You don't get that with the wood shaft ones. So what I do a lot of times is sometimes I'll just kind of shave off a little bit of that acrylic resin very lightly. I'm not taking hardly anything off, just that top layer. You could probably even do that with sandpaper. And I find that for the most part, a handheld sharpener in this case does pretty well for the colored pencil, but I can use the knife method too as well. And there we go. That's a pretty good point right there. And you know, I could come over here, have my sandpaper pad, and find a clean one. There it is. There's a clean one. Tear that off, and then sharpen that up a little bit. Scrape that off. Scrape it over. Right, like so. Kind of wipe it off. Brush it off with your breath, or sometimes I'll take a rag, and that little extra residue that sits on top of a pencil, sometimes if you're not careful, that will get on your drawing, and you don't want that, and it kind of gets annoying. So just be mindful of that. And then once you get that working for you, I'll flip over this scratch paper. Then you get that versatility that you want when you're drawing. You get that broad, really broad stroked, right, way to draw, and then you can pop right on up and get a nice thin, line too, or you can move it to right, and you've got that as well. So I could write a message there, hi, right? So you can get that in all-in-one methodology. Now again, with the Progresso pencil, they're so soft, so that point is going to go pretty quick. And so again, you go right back to your sharpener. You can sharpen that up, twist and turn in your little handheld sharpener, and you're good to go. That's a pretty decent tip. And then once that shaft starts to come down a little bit, I exposed more with the blade in through here, and then hand sharpen again. I just feel like that's easier to use the handheld sharpener, and you get the same result with the knife. Sometimes a knife just doesn't, it leaves it a little too choppy chiseled in terms of the Progresso pencil. So keep that in mind. It's the small details doing the small things that make a master draftswoman or draftsman, draftsperson, right, all together. It's the small things that really, really do matter. All right, so let's pull out just a little bit here with our camera. And now I want to show you, get into a little bit deeper about that technical graphite pencil I showed you earlier in materials, but I didn't really get to sharpen it. So this is a nice way to work if you are doing very technical drawings, and let me show you why. The reason why is you can get a very, very finite point and keep your drawing very, very technical. So here's again the technical pencil, drafting pencil, and it's got this little point here, and this opens up and grabs, which is really nice, like a little grabbing hand, and it sucks it back in a little bit. And then you can buy different leads with it. This is a B and a 2H, the B being what, harder, softer than the 2H. You should know this by now, right? So the B's a little softer, 2H a little harder. Let's take out the B and let's sharpen one. So it comes in these nice cartridges and these shafts, like so, shafts of lead. And I'm going to stick the blunt end of the shaft in, not the sharpened end, just to show you. So you put the graphite into the pencil, like so. Grabs quite nicely, very nicely like that. And it disappears if you want. Whoops, comes back out. And expose some, maybe about a 1/2 inch to maybe slightly less, 3/8 quarter, like so. Then you put it into the sharpener, which I love, and there it is flat to you. Looks kind of like just a basic cylinder with this opening, and I put it in the opening. And then you find, you'll feel it fit into the groove. You'll kind of work it around. You'll feel the lead fit in. And then here's what you do. You just turn it. I turn it, and then I also twist it as well. So I turn the pencil, but then I'm twisting here as well. And keep going until you don't feel any more resistance. Then you open it up, and you get what is a pretty nice fine point. Then it comes with this little felt tip pad thing, and you stick that in there. It takes the little shavings off. And now I could go a little bit further and sharpen even more. And that gets me a pretty fine point. And if I feel like I need more of a fine point, what do? I go right back to my trusty sandpaper pad, and I can sharpen down even further. A lot of people who draw, you know, not even so technical, but they draw the figure, like to, especially if they're drawing with graphite, they like to use the technical pencils, which I think is fine, quite a bit actually. I like it as well. It doesn't get, you don't get dirty on this end, especially if you're more of a clean drafts person. And you advanced people know what I mean by that. If you're not so heavily into expressive smudging and charcoal, whatever, and you like a clean, you know, sort of scumbled kind of stroking quality, these keep your hands more fastidiously clean and not so encumbered by charcoal or other graphite dust as well. So again, these come in packs from 6H all the way to 6B here as well. So I mostly use this. I used it as a student when I was at Art Center in Los Angeles, and I used it for perspective drawing in Gary Meyer's wonderful, wonderful Gary Meyer, his classes. And he's the one that taught me about these, taught us all really. And what a wonderful artist and person and professor instructor he is. And I thank him for that. Okay, so those are the technical pencil setups. I really think this is a nice way to go in addition to the wood shaft in terms of graphite. Okay, let's talk about sharpening now. Let's talk about sharpening. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay, maybe left is the Conte crayon. And you know, sometimes, and these can be kind of hard, And sometimes I'm in between sandpaper pad, like so. It makes that scratchy noise. Sometimes I'll use the sandpaper pad first, and I'll get the rough quality out. Like so. And see how it's pretty roughed in? And then you can take your other pad and get it down to a more finite point. In some artists, that's enough. In some artists like a more finite point with their Conte or their charcoal, etc. Now what you can also do is put these into your electric eraser. Let me grab it. It's over on my shelf to the right here. Hold on just a second. And let me get this fired up. Let me plug it in and get it fired up. And let me show you what I do as well. There's another little fun technique you can use. And again, it's all about controlling your materials to get the marks that you want or that you need for the type of expression that you're going for. You know, all this can seem complicated, but later on you'll learn that it's just evolving your tool. So I'll take the eraser out and I'll put the Conte crayon in, like so. And then I'll tighten up the ring that's on it as tight as I can get it without breaking it. And see, it turns, right? Okay, now you can take your sandpaper, lozenge pad, Dr. Throat lozenge, and then you can run it on there. And so what that does is it starts to take more of that machined edge off, which I don't like. I don't like that linear hard edge that it's caked, it's baked into that shape. They have molds and they pour this material and they bake it in with clay. And again, more clay means a harder product. Less clay, less hard. And so take a look at what that gives you. That gives you something really nice. You could even draw with these if you wanted, right? You'd have to control the tip a little bit more. Then I'll take it out, and this gives you a pretty nice surface. So I used to use especially the electric eraser for wax pencils or these waxed cartridges like this. This is a Conte crayon, but you can buy wax pencils in sticks, and I would put them inside and when I wanted a nice blunt, you know, really large blunt end like so, but even more, I would go ahead and stick them in here and sharpen and take off that really hard molded edge and make a nice slightly rounded blunt material. All right, so that's the electric eraser sharpening as well. So pretty fancy stuff. Okay, so I think again too, it's important that you can shape and size to your needs once you get a little bit more advanced. Now I've got the Carbothello pen and the pencil, and that's pretty much ready to go. I've got it, you know, and then some people like their lead exposed a little bit longer. I really don't. I break them more easily that way. It depends on how you hold your pencil and the strength and the pressure that you push down on really makes a difference, and we'll get into more of that idea as we get into line in other lessons. So I just sharpened the Carbothello pencil in the same way as the charcoal, and that's good to go. I could sharpen the tip even further, but it seems to be working nice and pretty fine. So the softer the lead, the more vulnerable it is to breaking, or it makes it more difficult to sharpen. And of course, the harder the lead makes it more tensily strong and easier to sharpen. Okay, I want to move now on to specialty papers. Let's do that. or let's move on to papers that will get you started. We'll actually talk about specialty papers at another time. Okay, let's talk a little bit about papers to get you started. Let me pen out here and show you a few items that are accessible to you at your local art store for everyone, depending, pretty much all of you, I would assume. And if not, then you could probably order it online. So let me start with the kind of standard, the drawing paper. This is Strathmore drawing paper, the 400 series. It's pretty light, and it comes to about 24 sheets or so. It's a little bit higher quality drawing paper. Again, it's wide. It's 18 inches by 24 inches, and that will generally get almost everyone started drawing. And so I've got a Progresso pencil here, making marks. And it takes charcoal really well. Charcoal pencil here. So it's a really great standard drawing material for almost really any process that will work on ink pen, ballpoint pen, graphite. I've got the ballpoint pen here, as well as the technical graphite pencil too as well. So that all works pretty well. Again, it's 18 by 24. Now, there are cheaper brands out there. I would suggest in the beginning with drawing paper, white sketch paper, go for as cheap as you can. Okay, as long as it says white sketch paper or drawing paper, not bond paper. Don't get bond. That's not, it's a little bit different. That's like a poster paper for like high school events if they want to advertise or whatever. So drawing paper, Strathmore is really great. Canson, Biggie, whatever you can find in your local area is fine. 18 by 24 is a really nice standard size. They do come in smaller sizes, 9 by 12, 14 by 17. Buy what you can, but you'll see that a lot of what I'll do in terms of demoing will be about 18 by 24 inch, and that's fairly standard, quote-unquote college size, high school size, if you will. Okay, so that's drawing paper. That'll get you started pretty well. And the next is newsprint. So newsprint, I always make the joke, it's a really poor drawing surface to work on, but it's great for practice. And you'll do lots of practice. If you want to get better and get to be competent and great, you'll do practice, practice, practice. You'll do it over and over again. And so newsprint is kind of one notch above toilet paper in the drawing paper world, but it has its purpose. Newsprint, this is Strathmore again. It's very expensive. This is 50 sheets, again, 18 by 24. And you can buy, quite a bit of it at a time. I think the more you buy in bulk, the better. But if you open it up, and I'll flip it around, it is what, for those of you that remember what newspapers were, it seems to be we're almost all digital now, but it's kind of manila looking, and it's fiber paper. Most of it's now recycled. Let's see if it says recycled on here. I don't see it on there, but a lot of it is now, you can imagine. And it is an archivally poor paper, meaning that it won't stand the test of time very well. It will yellow within, no time. But it is great for practice. So if I'm sketching, and I'll sketch out cube here, it is wonderful for doing all kinds of sketches, thumbnail sketches, idea sketches, or if you're just starting out with the figure, starting to work out all the basics with the figure for sure. Like if I did a small little gesture drawing of a figure. And then these I went through here, and you were doing 15-second poses, something like that. These are great. Newsprint is great, so you don't waste a lot of money on high-end materials, because it's great for practice, great for drawing forms, sketching forms, you name it. And it takes on pretty much any drawing material. Now I'm moving to a Progresso pencil, which is fine here. Progresso is a little tougher because it's wax, so it doesn't get quite as dark. And graphite's okay for newsprint, ballpoint pen, etc. So again, newsprint and drawing paper, they're both 18 inches by 24 inches, and that will serve you, I think, pretty well. Now, I'll use probably these two types of papers quite a bit in the demos that we've done and will do in the future. So you can imagine using a lot of that. Then I'll bring in specialty papers from time to time. If I use a specialty paper that you haven't seen before, I'll try to name it, or that I haven't used before in the videos. I'll try to name it, put it on the screen so you can see and see what that's about and go try it yourself. Now the next things I want to show you is sketchbooks. And I keep a ton of sketchbooks, but I've got a bunch here. And I'll start out small to large, and these are about 4 inches by 4 inches or 5 inches. And these are great for mostly ink. I use sketchbooks for ink almost exclusively, but you can use sketchbooks for a wide range of drawing practices. Ink, not only ink and washes like here. This is my Rubens sketchbook when I was studying his compositions exclusively. And I used to use ink, technical pens, and watercolor washes. And so that worked really well. That's my Rubens sketchbook. Sometimes I'll just name them in through there. But you can use graphite, you can use charcoal. Charcoal, be careful, it's going to smudge. So you got to be careful. You could use Progresso, you could use ballpoint pen. I've seen some artists, fabulous artists that render in ballpoint pen that are just amazing. So all of these are valid to use. And of course you can paint as well, just watercolor, or you could paint in acrylic or gouache. Oil is a little bit tougher on paper, but this is made from a manufacturer in Kansas City called Handbook, Travelogue Handbook, and I use these quite a bit. They're hardbound, and they are nice in that you can fold this over if you want to travel, and then open it up and draw and sketch, and then you fold it back in, and you're on your merry way. A cheaper version, a real cheap version that I have my students get when we do gesture drawings, is this one. This is Strathmore makes this 100 sheets, and so it's cheaper. It's ring bound, 9 by 12. It's the same kind of white sketch paper that was in the larger 18 by 24 inch drawing paper. So it's just a smaller size. And these are, I have my students do just gesture sketch after gesture study after gesture study. And then, again, the more you do, the better you get, and I'm a firm believer in repetition. So this, if you go front and back, and the more sketches you probably do, 15, 16, 1700, gesture sketches within that. It's great for practice. And you can do watercolor brush as well. I did some of these, which takes pretty well. It's not too wet or saturated, so it takes it pretty well. And then there are other types of just bigger sizes. So the brand I showed you over here, the Travelogue, this is larger. This is about 9 by 12-ish. And these are some of my sketchbooks I've kept. And these are all mostly in technical pen or fountain pen. You see here. And then you can also do watercolor wash, which I like to do as well. And so these are okay for washes. You can't, and I use them more like drawing, just to tint and tone, but I also just draw line work with the brush. I don't actually sketch beforehand, but you could if you wanted to. You could do it in graphite. But these, again, this paper is a nice sketch paper. It's a little velvety, and it is certainly good for any material in addition to washes and watercolor that you want to use. So you can certainly use any of that at your will, and they come in different sizes. Again, it's the Travelogue made by Handbook, and it's made in Kansas City, Missouri. Most of your local art stores, your better ones, will have them. In Town Plaza and Suitors here in Cincinnati are the two best, and they'll definitely have these. But anywhere you're out there, I'm sure they'll have them, or you can order them online. This is the same company. It's just a little bit more of a landscape format. I haven't opened this one yet, so I'll open that one soon. And a slightly different size is this sort of book, I guess book size, if you will. And it's about, I don't know, 5 by 8. And then you open it, it's a little bit larger, but you can see these drawings I've done before here, mostly just ink. So I do most of my sketchbook work in ink, pretty much exclusively. Okay, all right. So that concludes this lesson. We talked about sharpening your tools, controlling your tools, very important. How you control them, how you control the tip, how you control the broadness of a drawing material, and then we've talked about papers, drawing paper, white sketch paper, newsprint, and then sketchbooks to get you started. And then again, if anything special comes up, I'll let you know. I'll put it up on the screen so you can see what I'm using, and I'll do that from now on, what I'm using and then what materials I'm using too as well. That will be very important. Okay, so thanks again. If you have any questions or concerns, email me and let me see your drawings out there. Once we get moving and going, let me see what you're drawing and doing. I'd love to see that and critique them. Okay, I'm Mark Leone, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.